everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to the Division 2, and today I'm bringing you the last of what I kind of dubbed the launch slate of videos for this new update and season that I had planned, and as the title states, that is a build guide for the new Escalation mode. Now, I'm pretty late on this, right? The season's already been out for a week. I'm sure there are plenty of other guides out there, or there's just been enough time that many of you have already discovered what combos work best in your teams, but I really just wanted to take the time to properly test everything and be sure that I was confident in my recommendations here. So, before we jump in, some very quick things to explain and underscore. The first being, if you have yet to play it, Escalation is really broken up into two halves. You first have tiers 1 through 5, which offer you moderate challenge and okay rewards, but then there's tier 6 through 10, and not only does the enemy scaling really ramp up there, but also the Hotfoot Mutator gets applied, which many agree is the most prominent and dangerous one to have to play around. But the challenge is not without its appeal, because on top of that, the rewards start to get better, with mission completions awarding you with exotic components. Of course, you then have higher chances of getting prototype drops. So, all of that is to say, this video is focused on builds for Escalation tiers 6+. Certainly what you will see in this video can still work for tier 5 and below, even non-prototype versions. And while that's not to say that not having prototype or some other things can't work above tier 6, that is the threshold where I really think the power of prototype gear kicks in, where fully utilizing the seasonal modifiers and team build synergy, that all comes into play. So once again, what I'm showing off in this video is designed to tackle Hotfoot as best as possible and still operate under the immense enemy scaling that the higher escalation tiers offer, by us using pretty much every advantage that we can in the playbook. So, alright, that's enough yapping for me. We'll get straight to it. As always though, I have to give a very quick shout out and thank you to our channel members. I cannot thank you all enough for the support and generosity that you continue to show myself and this channel. But, alright, let's dive in. Before we flip to the build view itself, sorry, just one more quick thing. I wanted to clarify that the damage build we're about to look at is what I have been using across both solo and group escalation runs. As stated, it is built around feeding every component into the other in order to tackle the stacking mutators that you'll see in higher runs, also the immense enemy scaling that is in place. So I designed this first and foremost to be used solo, but then of course you can seamlessly hop into a group and it shines there no problem. You may not have the absolute maximum DPS on this build in the same way that a loadout built with having a healer on the team in mind would, but again, this is built around the idea of shaving off some of the tension and friction from these escalation runs. So I just wanted to make sure we took a moment to explain that and show off some of the solo gameplay here, but now let's take a look at the build. So here it is. Now yes, the very first thing that you will notice is that this is a fully prototyped loadout. This was the first build that I decided to invest my exotic components into in order to upgrade. And while having prototype is the most recommended for these higher escalation tiers, it's going to make things a lot easier. Obviously that is not something that you can just go and whip up if you don't already have the correct pieces and the right resources, right? So I wanted to be sure that I showed off and offered a non-prototype version in case you need that to start with, and then you can work on upgrading from there. This is a look at how I had the build set up before prototyping everything, including the normal gear stat brackets for crit and all of that. I was able to construct all of this very easily using the Build Station community tool, so shout out to them. I'll leave a link for that site down in the description in case you ever want to use this. It's quite handy. But yeah, if you don't have the means to upgrade into prototype yet, or you don't have these exact pieces ready to go, then you should try and aim for something like this. But let's finally dive into the specifics of the build. I first just wanted to talk about the actual pieces here. This is the exact same piece setup that you will have just seen in that non-prototype version. We have 4 pieces of the Tipping Scales gear set, the Equalizer, Named Unit Alloys chest piece, and then the Contractor's gloves. We will discuss certain gear choices made here in just a moment, but I wanted to quickly just cover the stats that you're looking for on these items. If we switch over to my totals, on my primary, I'm hitting 55.5 crit chance and 57% crit damage. Of course, these values will range depending on if your prototype items come with higher than minimum crit values, as you'll see when we look at them. Mine all rolled at their minimums. As per usual, though, the exact placement and locations of each of these stats and where you have your mods and all those things, it does not matter. You just want to try and get as close to 60% crit chance as possible, and then fill in the rest with crit damage, and that is, as you will see, what I have across every piece. Weapon damage, crit chance, and then crit damage where applicable. Also, I know that the total crit damage might look pretty low, right? only 57%, but we are compensating for the fact that tipping scales, once fully stacked and utilizing the backpack, gives us 350% additional crit damage. Alright, but now let's talk about a few of these specific components, and the first one here is our primary weapon of the Big Alejandro. Of the choices here that might be debated, this would definitely be one of them. The primary argument being, why would you not want a high-end prototyped LMG, which could come with higher base stats and an augment? And so I just want to say, off the bat, that is completely viable. If you want to go for that, maybe you have a prototyped LMG ready to go, absolutely use it. But as far as for why I've chosen the Big Al, on the one hand, it is one of the exotics that has not definitively been outclassed by prototypes, given that its talent grants us a huge amount of bonus damage, so you're certainly not going to be noticing like a huge lack of DPS by using this. But beyond that, even if it is not like absolutely comparing to the best of the best prototyped LMGs, it's simply just the handling and stats of this weapon that continue to convince me to use it. Especially its blind fire accuracy, it is surprisingly good for an LMG, one of the best I think I've ever seen in the game, and so that inherently makes it very effective in Escalation, where you're wanting to keep your head down and continue stacking and damaging. So again, feel free to use whichever primary LMG you like, but I'm sticking with the Big Al. Besides that though, there's then the matter of the Contractor's Gloves, and this is kind of the main deviation that you'll notice from a similar pre-escalation build of this type, because we are not using the infamous Overdog's exotic gloves. There's two main reasons why I'm not using those here. For one, I do think that the inability to prototype exotic items does power creep the Overdogs a little bit more than, let's say, it does with the Big Alejandro, right? By the fact that we have the ability to get up to 1.5 times weapon damage and damage to armor, that just makes the Contractors much more appealing, especially since we also get the brand bonus of 10% LMG damage. But probably more importantly is that while the 30% amplified damage that you get from the Overdog's talent is still very good, its downside becomes much more prominent and much more important in Escalation, where the time to kill on enemies is much higher. Right? Because from its talent, if you're targeting the proper hierarchy enemy and getting the damage boost, then you'll be pulling amazing numbers. But in those times that you need to be shooting the incorrect enemy, if you will, I just think you're losing out on too much for too long. And so more than anything, I just think that the Contractors provide you with much more reliability in Escalation. That said, since the season has began, I've seen many making the case that instead of running these, you could also make a strong argument for the Hollow Man Y'all Mask. Reason being that Escalation features a lot of red and purple bar NPCs where damage to health, or health damage, is much more important. So I've not had a chance to test out this mask a ton yet, but I think I can comfortably say that whichever of the two you choose to go with, either this or the Contractor's Gloves, you're going to be fine either way. Alright, but then let's finally talk about kind of the secret sauce of the build, if you will. So far you might be thinking, okay, this looks like a pretty standard tipping scales loadout, but one thing that you may have noticed is the shock resistance mods that I'm running on each of my 3 mod slot pieces, and wondering why those are there. And so kind of the final ingredient of this build is that I've leveraged my seasonal modifiers, my gear mods, and my skill picks to help me, in some cases, fully combat Hotfoot, which once again is one of the most punishing mutators that becomes active on Escalation tier 6 and above. If you've not yet encountered that one, Hotfoot will give you a charge bar above your armor, and it fills up while you are stationary, it depletes while you're moving, but if it does end up filling up, you get shocked and take a certain percentage of damage. And so that can be very hard to play around in a mode like Escalation, where you want to stay as safe and in cover as you can against enemies that can damn near one-shot you. The good news though, if you didn't know, hazard protection and shock resistance can combat the shocking component of Hotfoot, and so once I learned that, that's really what got the gears turning here. And so if we go into our seasonal modifiers, which once again we are fully utilizing here, I've stacked these up so that I'm receiving 45% hazard protection. And as you can see, I'm getting those by having Saturate Utility in my first slot, Invert Defense in my second slot, and Convert to Defense in my third. Just as a quick side note, I do believe that there is a way to get these exact stats plus 20% skill damage by using the Nullify wildcard passive. I don't have that one unlocked yet, hence why you're not seeing it here, but it's also not terribly important for this build specifically because you don't need skill damage, but I just wanted to point that out before anyone comments about it. So yeah, from this setup, setup, we are getting 45% hazard from our mods. Then from the Shade Watch, assuming you're at level 1000, you will get an additional 10% hazard protection here. And then finally, as we took a look at on the build, I have shock resist mods on all 3 pieces of the mask, backpack, and chest. You want to try and get those as close to 10% as you can. And so in combination, if we go over to our stats and go all the way down, you'll see that we have 84.3% shock resistance. Now, if you did not know, you actually don't need to hit a 100% resistance on any given status to be immune to something, right? Each individual status has their own threshold. For shock, that is reportedly around 83%, so we are clearing that value. You will notice that sometimes in the gameplay, it does still shock me for like half a second at a time. I don't know if that is because we are so close to the threshold that maybe it's not quite counting, or perhaps something about Hotfoot's coding just overrides it. But much of the time, you'll notice that when the bar fills up, I don't get shocked at all. I get to safely stay in cover. And so that alone just makes a world of difference, in my opinion, because it just takes off some of that constant pressure in these already high intensity moments. But that is not all, because this also then plays into our skill choice of the fortified smart cover. Now, you do have to own the Battle for Brooklyn DLC to unlock and use this. I cannot recommend it enough if you do have that, but unfortunately there's not really a great alternative that I can recommend if you don't. It's not required to have this, to be clear, but it does help you out that much more in this overall build setup, and that's due to the fact that while you are in cover that it is boosting, you receive bonus armor. And so with this build in Escalation, we're already going to be in cover the majority of the time, right? Trying to dodge enemy fire, build up our big Alejandro stacks. And so the beauty of this is that already most of the time we get to avoid the shock effect of Hotfoot with the hazard protection that we have on the build. But even with that, there's still then the other half of Hotfoot, which is that every time that the bar fills, you get damaged by a certain amount. Well, guess what? If this smart cover is active, the bonus armor that it provides will soak that damage up. Meaning, the combination of the shock resistance and the fortified smart cover, if utilized properly, can almost entirely negate the Hotfoot mutator. Now, this is not going to have a 100% effectiveness or uptime, right? But it is still a very potent combo. And one of the nice things about the fortified smart cover is that if you get stripped of the bonus armor and you either then cover to cover away and then back to it, or you straight up exit cover and re-enter, that bonus armor value will reapply. And so that almost makes those moments where Hotfoot does override your resistance and shock you momentarily worth it, because you then get to exit and re-enter cover and get a fresh stack of armor. So yeah, I think this is a really effective combo that you will get the hang of pretty quickly once you start using it. Now, one final tip that I will give is that while it does pain me to not be using the Blackout Pulse active modifier on this build just because of how fun and strong it is, using the Optimize Overload active modifier will benefit this overall gameplay loop greatly. As you can see, when you activate it, it reduces your skill cooldowns by a pretty large percentage, but also, once you get it to level 5, upon activation, you get overcharged, and that duration is extended depending on how many defensive stacks you have. And in this case, because we built into hazard protection, we have quite a few. So that's just even more synergy, kind of completely coincidental, honestly. But this ensures that if you have that moment of, shoot, my smart cover's down, I've used my revive hive, I'm about to die, this can truly be a lifesaver to reduce or sometimes even reset those cooldowns and stay in the fight. Well, there you have it, folks. That is the build, that is the breakdown. I know there were a lot of moving parts there, a lot to explain. I hope I didn't lose anybody along the way. But yeah, I tested this thing pretty extensively, and it has served me very well so far, so I hope it can do the same for all of you. It is worth noting that although I kept touting this as a tier 6 plus build, you can absolutely use this in the lower escalation tiers as well. I certainly did. If doing so, you likely will not need the shock resistance as much, if at all, so feel free to swap those mods for more crit and reshape your modifiers for something like headshot damage. But between tipping scales, Big Alejandro, the fortified smart cover, you will be a fortress when within cover. It's really quite fun. So at this point, I would love to hear any of your thoughts and reactions to this build. What do you think about it? Is there anything that you would change on your end? If you have any remaining questions about how this is all set up, certainly feel free to share those as well. And then finally, if you're up for sharing, I would love to know what some of the loadouts that you all have been running in Escalation have been so far. What are the highest tiers that you've made it to? Yeah, looking forward to see what everybody's got to say. That is just about going to wrap it up for me today, though. I appreciate your patience on this upload as a whole, and thank you so much if you made it all the way to the end. I will see you back very soon for more, but until then, my friends, RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's
is
go.
coming to the Division 2.
Let's go.
And